Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home. Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive. And if you are noticing a little froggy in my voice, you are absolutely correct. I've been sick and I got laryngitis, so I couldn't talk for a little while, which is terrible for an emotional eater not to be able to talk. Oh my goodness, I need to talk. I need to express myself. I need to get it out. So I couldn't do that for a few days, which, I also need to be quiet and, hang out in bed. So I did that. That was good. And now I'm back to talking. The show must go on. So, and my boyfriend thinks my voice is kind of sexy. So it's not all bad. If you're here at the Heal Your Hunger Show for the first time, welcome. So happy you're here. This is where we dig into the deeper issues that really make us crave food, because it's not food we're craving. Let's be real. There's different stuff going on underneath, and I dig into that stuff here on the show. And today's show is no exception. I have an amazing guest here. I'm super excited to introduce to you. And guess what? If you want to get connected and not try to go it alone, you can join us in the Secret Sauce group. This is a private Facebook group where people go who are listeners of the show and want to be the first to know about what's going on with Heal Your Hunger and how you can get involved, and announcements that I have and all that, and just community. You can join us at the Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating on Facebook. Just type in the Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating, and we'd love to have you. That's on Facebook. And if you have not yet rated this show, given us 5 fabulous stars, we would love it. It would make it so it would be very helpful for getting the word out about the show. So please share the show with others, but also be sure to take the time to rate it. You go into the podcast and you can rate it on iTunes. And I would so appreciate that. It'll take a little, extra effort, of course, but hopefully you'll it's a little gift to me. So if you feel like doing something nice for somebody, rate the show. Thank you. I appreciate it. And so do all the other people who don't yet know there's a way out and a way to overcome emotional eating. So thank you in advance for that. So let's dig in. I can't wait for you to meet my guest. Carolyn Coker Ross is an author, speaker, expert in treating eating disorders and addiction. She's an MD and the CEO of the Anchor program, which is an online telemedicine program for binge eating disorder, emotional eating, and food addiction. She's board certified in preventive medicine and addiction medicine. Dr. Ross presented a TEDx Pleasant Grove talk on the gifts of intergenerational trauma, which we're going to get into today as well. She's the author of 3 books. The most recent is the Food Addiction Recovery Workbook. She's contributing author to the recently released book, Treating Black Women with Eating Disorders, A Clinician's Guide. And she's also host of the podcast, The Dr. Carolyn Coker Ross Show, which I'm excited to be on soon as well. So happy to have you here, Carolyn. And I just love the opportunity to really just hang out and chat, one professional to another, being in the trenches as we both have been helping people with disordered eating of all kinds. So thank you for being here.
Hi, Tricia. How are you? That's a pretty dress you have on there.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I put it on. I felt inspired to wear it. And then I thought, this is a good Zoom dress.
It certainly is. And those are hard to find, believe me.
Yeah. Yes. So we had a pretty good chat before we started rolling here. And we started with a TED Talk, comparing notes a little bit to our TEDx experiences. You've done 1 TEDx talk, so congratulations. And congratulations, you have another one coming up. So what will you do your talk on this time?
This time it's going to be on racial trauma.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I founded with 3 colleagues an institute, a consulting group to do anti-racism training with treatment facilities, mental health facilities.
Wow.
And we're now branching out into corporations. We worked with the public defenders in Phoenix and so on and so forth.
Super
And we're
cool.
doing trainings for one of the IDEPs in Atlanta. So we've been doing that now for over a year. And
Wow.
yeah, and I
It's
really,
so timely, my goodness.
yeah, I really love the work. And, being African American, it's a chance for me to kind of get a different message out that
Totally.
people are talking about trauma more, but they aren't talking about racial trauma and all that. So,
Yes. Oh, I love that. Good for you.
yeah.
And I'd love to go there today. I mean, but that's totally unrelated to like eating disorders and that kind of thing.
Well, the eating disorder piece is what led me down that path because
Sure.
about 5 years ago, I started speaking with these same people on treating eating disorders in African American women.
Yeah.
And I was a contributor to a book called this by the same name, Treating Eating Disorders. I think it's in Black women.
I saw that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we did the speaking, then we all contributed to the book, and then that led to the development of the institute, because there were so many treatment facilities that came out saying, oh yeah, we're in support of, after George Floyd, we're in support of anti-racism, and they give one webinar and then that's it. That's
Yeah.
all they do. So at least one of them has, like Alsana did a whole training for their entire staff, clinical staff, over 135, no, like 150, 60 people. And we did that over a 3-month period. So it was really good.
That's amazing. But I would think that eating disorder, and this is my, I don't know if this is right or stereotype, but I would think that eating disorder units are filled with like white girls, like, right?
Pretty much. But
Yeah.
you know what? They get more and more are getting this sprinkling of Black girls, and they don't know what to do with them. And they don't know how to manage the milieu around them either.
Yeah.
So, you have a facility in Florida or Birmingham or wherever, St. Louis, and, there's a lot of racism. And I think Black girls, Black women are no longer just letting things slide. I think that's one of the things that came out of the George Floyd murder, was just people were like, you know what, we're done.
Screw
just
this. Yeah.
off the hook, and
Yep.
saying they mean well, so it's okay to let them get away with this, that, or the other. And so situations are coming up where, like there's a situation in one of the treatment centers where we worked where, someone made a comment that was racist, and the Black woman who was in the facility confronted her. And then, then everybody was taking sides. Oh, she didn't mean it. She's not really, how that conversation, you've probably seen it play out in the media. Yeah. I'm not really a racist, blah, 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 blah. And so that is happening in treatment facilities. And, I think also treatment facilities are losing out on bringing in Black women because they're, the women are like, why should we go there? There are no therapists who look like me. There are no dietitians who look like me, etc.
Totally. And is it eating disorders, specifically eating disorders treatment programs that you work with?
We work with any kind of treatment program, as well as, like I said, we're now working with corporations and other groups that are interested. So,
yeah, interesting. Do you have a personal story that kind of got you into this work?
Into the eating disorder work?
Yeah.
No, I don't really have that. I came to it more as a medical doctor, and I was just, from my professional point of view, really fascinated by the fact that eating disorders and addictions as well really involve mind, body, and spirit. And since I'm an integrative medicine physician, that was really appealing to me. Mm-hmm. And also just the complexity of of that. I've always, most of my career, I've focused on working with women. So that's another aspect that, drew me in, was the fact that, most people with eating disorders are women. Although I have to say, I really enjoy working with men as well, but just don't see them as much,
Right. And I'm actually curious about that because I've started to get inquiries about helping men. And if my program, is designed for men as well. And in the past, it's been like, no, it's just women. And I just get to thinking, why? Like, it's totally applicable to men. I can modify and create a program for men. Is there an increasing number of men who are starting to get hip to the idea of having an eating disorder or emotional eating, food addiction? Is it growing?
I think there's an increasing awareness. I think there's a slight increase in men reaching out for treatment. In the beginning of my program, I did accept men, but I really think that I do a lot of work around the trauma piece, and I think that made it difficult for men to be in the group. So I would have, one or two men in a group of, 5 or 6 women. And often there were just issues that came up. And I didn't see that when I worked in a treatment facility like Sierra Tucson or some of the other places I worked. I didn't feel that it was a problem then. And I think that it's just the container is different, when you're fine, and it's just a different container. So
trying to create that sense of safety, that's so important.
So I just decided to really limit my practice to women for now until I could get a group of men together.
Yeah.
So if I could get all the men in one group, I think it would be awesome.
Agreed. And that's how I would work as well. I would separate it out. I think that just, that creates the safety and the boundaries I think that are needed to do the deeper work. So I was thinking about gay men too. I ran into a man recently who's gay, who I told him what I do. And he's like, oh my God, in fact, I told him I want to have him on my podcast, but he said, my mom was 400 pounds. My sister was 450 pounds. And my other sister and I were anorexic, in high school. And he had his own journey of healing, around that, but it was intense. And he said, the whole piece around being gay, it was part of that journey as well.
There's a lot of focus on physique in the gay community. And there was I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, a guy who started an association for treating eating disorders in men. I don't know if you remember that. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, I'd love to know. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it'll come to me. But I had him on my podcast as well. And I do think there are different issues, like the whole muscularity issue, and body dysmorphia is different in men, and so on. And the pressure. And the pressure, yeah. And the pressure to not express your emotions is also there. So that's another factor. So
yeah, it's interesting. There are different. It's a different set of issues, but certainly debilitating nonetheless.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about the trauma piece, and obviously you've done a lot of work with people with eating disorders around trauma. And can you talk about kind of your experience of that and observing that and the work you do around that?
Yeah, I agree with Gabor Mate that addictions and eating disorders, he didn't say eating disorders, but I'm saying eating disorders. He said addictions have their roots in trauma, but I would say 90+% of the women that I work with do have trauma. And, I think when we look at Gabor Mate's definition of trauma, that loss of an essential part of yourself, a sense of safety, security, trust, or vitality, then the understanding of trauma becomes more complete. Because when we identify trauma as the event, then that's the problem. But when we recognize that the event is not what makes it traumatic, it's a person's response to that or the effect that event has on them. And obviously there's some events that would be traumatic to everyone, like we have in our country, 9/11, traumatic to most Americans, right?
Yeah.
But even within that, some people have more resilience and ability to kind of come back from traumatic experiences, and others don't. But for me, that's where, all of the movement happens, is when we address whatever that trauma was, whether it be neglect, which is a big one in women living in larger bodies. It can be emotional neglect or physical neglect. And then, abuse, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, all of those things. And when people actually start to think about it, because I think when trauma happens, you think, oh, that's just the way our family is, or that's just the way things are. But when you're in a group, as you know, then you start hearing other people say, no, that's not normal. That's right. Not,
yeah,
it shouldn't have happened to you. And then you start to realize that it's really important to address that.
No question. I will say that it took me a long time and I needed that outside validation. My mentor had to say to me, that wasn't okay. And that was abuse, right. Because I totally minimized the sexual abuse I experienced and thought, oh, and, on the scale of sexual abuse, it was like way down there. So it's not even worthy of calling it abuse, but I had to kind of have that reflection outside, not so I could be a victim, but just sort of realize that I was victimized and I got to deal with it as such. And that did help me.
Yeah. And I think for women, there's so much piled on when you talk about sexual abuse. Like, I've had patients who were in high school and they were sexually abused by an older teacher or a coach or somebody like that. And they think of it as, well, I just fell in love with them, but they don't realize they were groomed, they were underage, they don't understand that. And that's a tough one. Then the other one is the one that happens in college, where all of us are drinking in college and you say no, but the other person who may be drunk as well still goes ahead. And then, how do you deal with that? Yeah. And so many of my patients said, well, it's my fault because I was drunk. And I'm like, but every college student is drunk at some point in their career, don't you think? Maybe not 100%, but I would say the vast majority of us who've gone to college were vulnerable when we were drunk and could have been taken advantage of, but that's not okay. So
yeah, it's so important to address that stuff, and it's so common, it's so common. And I think the sad thing is we all internalize it. Those of us who have disordered eating, we internalize it, blame ourselves, and don't talk about it, so we don't heal, and if we don't talk about it, we can't heal from it. And I think realizing how common it is, and how we can overcome it, it doesn't have to define us. Right. Like you said, it's our response to it. If we unpack that, and just realize that we can have new responses to intimacy. I mean, it took me a long time to get over, my fear of intimacy. That was definitely a way that I dealt with things.
Yeah, I see that a lot with patients as well. So, yeah. And I think, for people who don't have eating disorders, but do have trauma, they've dealt with it in other ways, whether it be drugs or drinking, or it could be, just shutting themselves off from intimacy, the relationship that lasts 3 months is the longest you've ever had. Those are all clues.
Yeah, that was me. You just nailed it. I was really good at like getting into them, but then when I was in them, I'm like, oh, this is way too messy.
Yeah. Not gonna go there.
I like the fun part at the beginning where you're obsessed, and then I realized you had to relate, so it took me a while to get used to that part. So yeah, interesting. So you gave a talk, a TED talk. We were talking about that earlier. Can we dig into that topic of that TED talk, your first TED talk?
Yeah, my first TED talk was called The Gifts of Intergenerational Trauma. And this really stemmed from my work with my patients, but also from looking at my own life and my own trauma and the trauma that I saw in my family. And in our family, we have pretty good genealogy. So we're able to trace, our family roots back to slavery.
Okay.
On once, at least on my mother's side. And, just looking at that family tree and recognizing that there's the effects of trauma just keep going. Like in every generation, we lose at least one child in our family who is lost to addiction or to mental illness, those are, or to suicide. So in every generation, when I looked at it, I kept thinking, well, wow, why is this happening? Our family is super educated, incredibly committed to family, loving people, blah, blah, blah. And yet we keep having these situations come up. And so looking at that and looking at the research, I began to see that there is quite a bit of research on intergenerational trauma, starting with the Holocaust and the offspring of Holocaust survivors who have particular traits that have been documented through the generations, and that those issues can stem all the way into the third generation. And then even when we look at things like adult children of alcoholics, I mean, most of us in mental health have seen families where a grandfather, great grandfather, father, and then child or patient have had alcohol use disorder. Yeah. So you have to ask yourself, what's going on there? Well, I know, some of it's genetic, but I think also from what we look at the adult children of alcoholics laundry list, we know that there are things that happen to you when you have a parent who has alcohol use disorder. And that may be what's changing the expression of that gene and adding in any trauma that you have in your own life, which may again, change your epigenome. That's that epigenetic thing. So I think it's very interesting. And I think it brings a lot of knowledge to people, a lot of people who don't have maybe what they would call big time trauma in their lives, but they still have all these signs of trauma. And then they can look back and say, oh, okay, well, maybe this is really passed from generation to generation.
100%. I love that. I mean, I love that you're talking about it. It's a tough topic, but I was recently, I have a fairly new boyfriend, and I was recently showing him a picture book of my family, and so I'd be talking to him, and, he's very, knows a whole lot about what I do, obviously. And so I was looking through the book, and I'm like, oh yeah, he killed himself at 11 years sober, and this woman died of alcohol, this aunt died of alcoholism, and this guy, had dementia, but probably induced by alcohol. And, and like, it just all over the place. I'm like, look at this. My family is like, there's so many people who have had, and it's, it's inescapable how it just shows up everywhere. And yeah, kids suffer from that. And they do, even if they don't end up with an actual addiction, like you said, the adult child, they get the ism, they get that trauma, passed down in some way. And it shows up, as maybe mental health issues, maybe OCD, maybe some other form of mental illness. And it's so sad.
Yeah, but I think the gift out of that TEDx talk, when I was talking about the gifts, is that even though trauma can change the expression of genes for the worse, it can also change. You can also change the expression of genes for the better. And so, there are members of my family who have what I call leveled up, where they have worked on their own trauma, and then they've helped their children work on the trauma that maybe they, were the source of, what I mean? And, totally. and so far that's showing up as an improvement. So I have my fingers crossed that doing, for those in the family who are committed to interrupting this cycle and doing their own work, that they will be able to help their offspring so that we don't continue to lose people every generation.
And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it is, there is healing that can happen. I know in my own family, that's true. Both my sisters, we all had eating disorders, yeah. And we're all doing our own work. And both my sisters are therapists, and I'm not a therapist per se, but I'm a coach, and so hopefully we are making a dent, on that genealogy for sure.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how important it is to do your own work. And interestingly, doing that, bringing you back to the TEDx talk, when I was preparing for the TEDx talk, it was shocking to me how my own trauma, which I had, I'm the oldest of 5. So I'm the strong one. Right. And so I had never really addressed certain things in my own life. And here I am preparing this TEDx talk and having memories and, flashbacks and all this. So, oh my goodness, here I'm teaching this, and there's still trauma that, I have that I hadn't even remembered. Honestly, I had not remembered.
Wow.
It was just stuff that happened to you when you were a kid. And you think, oh yeah, that, that wasn't a big deal. I sailed right through that. Yeah, you sail right through that, but there are consequences. There are health issues that, come up. There's all of the effects of any kind of stress on your body, mind, and spirit, that if you don't address that. So the TED Talk was very cathartic for me. And I was trying to explain this to one of my sisters who had come to the TED Talk. And she said, "Why are you crying? Well, that was so great. You did a great job. Why are you crying?" And I'm like, you just don't understand. That was like, first of all, being vulnerable about my own stuff in front of however many people, and then just the catharsis of, realizing that I had experienced these things when I was, young.
Yeah.
Girl.
So. Wow. You thought you were doing a TED Talk for professional reasons, but all of a sudden.
That's exactly right. I sure did.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And I think that's what contributed to it being so stressful for me, is just, it was just a shock, and I think that happens from time to time. You think you've done all your work, and then something from when you were 8 years old comes up, it's just like, what? I did that. I took care of this.
This shouldn't be happening now.
I've been in therapy. What's the problem?
It's so true. I tell my clients, I'm like, the train will keep coming around until it's healed. We will find new opportunities in our life to bring that stuff up, and then we get to work on it and heal.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be careful about telling people that things go away once it's healed, because I think we heal, the way I look at it is we heal in pieces. Mm-hmm. And those pieces are, what can come up throughout your lifetime. They don't come up all at one time, and then boom, you work on this, and then maybe a little bit comes up a year later. For me, it's, it's been really interesting to watch. I don't know if you know, but my middle son committed suicide.
Okay. No, I didn't know.
I thought, obviously I was floored when he died, and couldn't get out of bed for 2 years. I got up, but I was literally a zombie. Wow. I felt like I had left my body.
Yeah.
And, over time I was able to, what we call heal. But then at 9 years, out of the blue, like I'm just sailing along my day-to-day life, and out of the blue, I am floored again with grief. And then at 15 years, something triggers another. So, when people say, well, I've already dealt with this, why keep coming? I always say, it's like we're made up of puzzle pieces. Mm-hmm. And if we embrace all the pieces and accept all that has happened to us, that is the most that we can do. Yes, we do the healing work, But that puzzle piece of my son's death is never going to go away.
Right.
It's still going to be there. And it, you know, it's still from time to time is painful.
Of course.
You know, it's different. Like I haven't left my body for a while, but, you know, it's still really, you know, can be really painful. And there's, you know, there's the aspect of the pain of his death, and there's the aspect of just missing him, you know, just that incredible longing, you know, with somebody, you know.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's intense grief. I cannot even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So true. And I don't think healing is linear. I mean, kind of on the point of what you're talking about, it's not linear.
Right.
You know, we do it. I think what matters, and what I think is, you know, and I try to encourage people to do, is to embrace the journey.
Yeah.
You know, like just to know that it's like everybody just wants to get done with it. Like you're
That's
just
what
like,
I'm saying. They just want, okay, now I'm done. I don't ever have to think about
like,
that.
No, you got to kind of accept that if you're going to be a full, you know, live a full life, you know, that we have to accept all pieces of that, you know, the good and the bad, you know, the sorrow and the joy. And it comes in waves. And if we can just like accept that, like, being human means having all feelings, you know, experiencing all feelings, and then just embracing that beautiful journey of going through, you know, whatever comes up. So it's hard to convince people that that's the better way to go.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be done with it, but I say, good luck with that.
Exactly.
I don't think the human psyche works that way after decades being in this business, but I think it's what keeps me in the business is seeing people heal, you know, and seeing people start that healing journey and getting clarity about their lives, becoming more authentically themselves. And that's when I work with my clients, you know, in the program I was telling you about. I mean, that's what keeps me going, because I just see so much dramatic change and you know, people opening up to a new way of living, which is powerful, you know.
Absolutely. Well, bless you for the work that you do. You're obviously good at it. You have a beautiful, gentle soul, and I know you bring comfort to so many people. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much. I have a final question for you, Carolyn. By the way, my middle sister's name is Carolyn.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, spelled the same way.
Not very common these days.
Yeah. So this being the Heal Your Hunger show, I'd love to hear what you feel at this point in time is your deepest hunger.
Ah, wow. That's a really good question. I think for me at this time, maybe it has to do with aging gracefully. You know, I would love to be able to age gracefully, and I find myself like fighting it every step of the way. Some days I feel like, okay, it's all right that, you know, like I'm not as good at this as I used to be, or I can't do as much of that, or I'm not going to jump off a cliff into a pond anymore. I'm not going to take those kind of risks. But then other days I just feel like, you know, but why not? Why can't I? Like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
So I think, again, that's a process. And, you know, I'm working my way through trying to find grace along the way.
Beautiful. Well, you're beautiful inside and out. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for being here. I'm excited to be on your show.
Yeah.
You know, as well.
This conversation.
Yeah, it's super fun talking with you. So thanks so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you on the next show.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.